Well, good day, viewers. Today we're working on a Caravan. We're doing a hub and bearing assembly on the right side here. So I've got it up on the hoist. We've got to remove the axle nut. I'm going to use an impact gun, but if you don't have an impact gun, you could use a power bar and stick a screwdriver or a square screwdriver in the rotor and use the brake caliper as a stop, or have an assistant hold their foot on the brakes, or loosen off the axle nut before you raise it off the ground. 21 millimeter bolts hold the caliper assembly on. We're going to take it off as an assembly because the brakes were recently done. So we're going to take the caliper off and hang it over here, disconnect the ABS wiring, grommets. This little bracket comes with the hub and bearing, but I don't usually change it. Usually sometimes the bolt will break off. And the connector is tucked up underneath here, so we'll have to get at the connector. So let's get started. Well, at least the axle's not seized in the hub. Gotta give it an impact gun. Using a 6-inch extension and a 21 millimeter half-inch drive socket and half-inch ratchet. Break these caliper bolts loose. And we'll spin them out with the impact gun. You can use anything to support the caliper. I use these hardware hooks. Just don't let it hang by the hose. It's not a good practice. Now these bolts that hold the hub on are 15 mil, and we have to take this shield off because the harness for the wheel speed sensor goes through the shield, or behind the shield. So we'll push these grommets out. And I'll take this shield off. $10 mil. These bolts don't usually break off because they're threaded into blind holes in the aluminum knuckle. Alright, so I'm going to loosen off these bolts from the back. I'm using a long snap-on flex-headed ratchet, 15 mil 3/8 drive shallow socket. Break them loose. Put some penetrating fluid on this. Now this hub is going to be seized in the corroded in the aluminum knuckle. I'm going to show you a trick to get it out. There's a ratcheting box end on that. If you push the axle in, you can get the socket onto the end of the nuts here. The axle hub boot, or the CV boot, kind of interferes with the socket, but with the axle pushed inboard it doesn't. So now there's a lot of tools out there to pull this hub bearing off, and you can usually sometimes hit it with a hammer on the back here, but these get corroded in this aluminum knuckle pretty good. I also have a hub knocker, it's called. It's a great big weight that hangs on here that you can hit. But here's a little trick that I'm going to show you that you might find useful. You need a hammer. Okay, we're going to knock one of the wheel studs out. And it comes out where the caliper is. So, might as well save the stud. Then I've got a long threaded bolt here. It's 12 mil coarse thread. It's a body bolt or suspension bolt or something. It fits in there. And I'm going to put a nut behind this brake rotor. And I'm going to turn this until it's up here. And we're going to use an impact gun and an open end wrench to hold this and push against the hub. Get my sockets ready. Another reason to take the backing plate off so you don't dent the backing plate. Let's try moving, turning it. So we get down here now. Onto the aluminum knuckle. See how tight that is. Oh, I'm hitting that. That's probably good enough. Now a little tap with the hammer. And that's it. You can see how corroded that was in there. Now we'll clean this all up and reverse the procedure and save this as a special tool. Might as well clean the pads where the brake caliper bolts onto. Well, that's ready to go. The wheel bearing's ready to go in there. Put a liberal coating of never sees on the bore. Anti-seize, not never sees. I think never sees is a brand name, right? Somebody will pick on me and say, hey, that's not anti-seize, or that's not never sees, that's anti-seize. Don't put never sees on the threads. If anything, put Loctite on the thread. So let's get the new wheel bearing ready to install. putting out anti-seize on the caliper mounting, or the hub mounting bolts as well. Okay, we got to look up the torque for those bolts. So the bolts that hold the hub assembly on are 37 foot-pounds, and the axle nut here is 118 foot-pounds. The caliper bracket is 125 foot-pounds. Again, we're going to tighten the axle nut after we put the rotor and the caliper bracket on. If you're interested, these bolts are 6 foot-pounds. They're not that critical. They're just 6 mil bolts. And we're going to put dielectric grease on the connector and blow the sand out of the connector and make sure it's routed properly. And yeah, let's mount the brake caliper on there now. Gotta turn it from the other side. Before you put the brake rotor on here, sometimes you guys put a layer of anti-seize on here, but make sure there's nothing on there. It should be clean. It's brand new. And we need to clean this surface here with the Rolox sanding disc because it's got some rust on it. So I'll do that and get it set up. So there's the rotor hub cleaned and some anti-seize on the surface. And I always put a spacer and a wheel nut to hold the rotor on so I'm not fighting with it while I'm trying to work the caliper onto its location. We can spin those in with the impact gun. We've got to torque them with the torque wrench. Here's my impact gun. Here it is. Okay, that's torqued to 125, and the axle nut's 118. And again, it's a 32 millimeter nut. Now, technically, you're not supposed to reuse this nut, but we're going to put Loctite on it because this is a lock nut. But we're going to Loctite it. My Loctite's getting low. And again, we can spin that in with the impact gun, but don't torque it with the impact gun. And just use a square punch to go in between the rotor here. You'll see in a sec. Between the fins. All it is a screwdriver. Now we route the wheel speed sensor wires. Put some dielectric grease on this connector. So that the seal doesn't roll and keeps the salt out of there. Route the wires and put the wheels back on. Clear the ABS fault code. So there's the wheel speed sensor wires mounted and ran and connected, routed. Make sure that the brake hose doesn't end up twisted. I've seen that a couple times. And we're ready to put the wheel back on, torque the wheel nuts. So the reason why we were doing the wheel bearing was because it had a right wheel speed sensor signal compare failure and a right wheel speed sensor signal erratic. And the bearing was a little bit rough, so we made a judgment call and changed the bearing. What's in the CAN bus error, low tire pressure, and high beam circuit has got modified. It's got the LED headlights, so that generates codes in there, but it doesn't turn on any warning lights. So we're going to clear all codes. Now I got to do that key on, engine off. And send it out the door. Take it for a quick ride. Make sure nothing comes back. Let's go into the ABS and monitor wheel speed sensor signals while we're on the road test. Left rear, vehicle speed, right rear. Okay. And graph. We'll take it for a road test. Well, all is well. All the speed sensors are working. The right front is the one over on the right front, right top. And it's working fine now. So we'll call this one fixed. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching.